Welcome back. Social media and fact-checking actually massively connected to our previous conversation. There's been many allegations about misinformation on social media about grooming gangs. But let's take a step back on this issue. Right back to 2017, not long after he had become president for the first time, Donald Trump branded Facebook anti-Trump. Conservatives had long accused social media firms of bias against them. Now, at that stage, Mark Zuckerberg, the Facebook founder and owner of its parent company, Meta, was a vocal critic of the president, including on his immigration policy and his language around the Black Lives Matter movement. Facebook had actually removed the president's profile after the January 2021 riots at the US Capitol.
What a difference, Kamal, a second election makes, because today, as Trump prepares for his second term in the White House, Zuckerberg has announced that Meta is scrapping its third-party fact-checking program on Facebook and Instagram in the US. Should stress, it's just the US, it's not the UK, although it could be coming here any day soon. He said that moderators were too politically biased, and needless to say, his decision has been welcomed by figures on the right, including the president-elect himself. Naturally, it's being seen as the latest step in the company repositioning itself for another Trump presidency. Mark Zuckerberg, being very digital first, of course, announced the news in a glossy video.
Hey everyone. I want to talk about something important today, because it's time to get back to our roots around free expression on Facebook and Instagram. I started building social media to give people a voice. I gave a speech at Georgetown 5 years ago about the importance of protecting free expression, and I still believe this today. But a lot has happened over the last several years. There's been widespread debate about potential harms from online content. Governments and legacy media have pushed to censor more and more. A lot of this is clearly political, but there's also a lot of legitimately bad stuff out there. Drugs, terrorism, child exploitation. These are things that we take very seriously, and I want to make sure that we handle responsibly. So we built a lot of complex systems to moderate content. But the problem with complex systems is they make mistakes. Even if they accidentally censor just 1% of posts, that's millions of people. And we've reached a point where it's just too many mistakes and too much censorship. The recent elections also feel like a cultural tipping point towards once again prioritizing speech. So we're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms.
Well, just to give this a bit of context, we're joined now by Matthew Field, our senior technology reporter. Matthew, welcome to the Daily Tea. You've been covering this for us at The Telegraph. As Camilla says, Zuckerberg has certainly changed his tune. I suppose we shouldn't be surprised that chief executives of major US businesses are thinking, okay, how can I make sure that my business maintains its successful trajectory, even though the incumbent at the White House has changed. Certainly Jeff Bezos at Amazon. We've already seen how close Elon Musk is to Donald Trump. So maybe no surprise that Zuckerberg has started to change his tune. But where do you think this has come from, and what is Zuckerberg trying to do?
So I think there's a sense that Zuckerberg in 2016 was under a huge amount of pressure from claims of Russian influence on Facebook and fake news, and I don't feel like this was ever really something that his heart was in the fact checking stuff, but it was something he sort of felt like he had to do, and he had to make a show of taking on this problem. What's changed, obviously, is Trump has got elected, and the political landscape has changed massively. Elon Musk has emerged as one of the closest allies of President Trump, and I think over time there have been questions about how effective the fact-checking program has been. To some extent, that's been pinned on how Facebook has enforced it, and there have been a few instances of fact-checkers not getting the right end of the stick.
Can you tell us, Matt, a little bit about how fact-checking has worked on Facebook?
So far, fact-checking has been done by independent third parties. So, there's names you might have heard of, like Reuters and AFP, and slightly smaller news and fact-checking organizations. And they have formed a sort of independent network that has added labels to posts that have are going viral on Facebook with false claims. And broadly, they've got things right. I think one of the criticisms has been that this has been a bit of a drop in the ocean in terms of the amount of misinformation that can spread on social media. But in the US, certainly, this has become a highly partisan issue, with those on the right being highly distrustful of fact-checking, viewing it as a sort of conspiracy to take down their news stories and their agenda.
Matthew, this isn't the only sort of step Zuckerberg has taken in a Trumpish direction. He's parted company with Nick Clegg, famously the leader of the Liberal Democrats in this country. He recently stood down as head of global affairs. He's been replaced by a Republican lobbyist called Joel Kaplan. The Trump ally Dana White has been appointed to the board. So clearly we can see that perhaps Zuckerberg is feathering his own nest. But is it also this desire to compete with Musk? Musk has obviously transformed X. He's put a lot more people back on the platform that the previous owner of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, had insisted should be removed. We've now got Facebook saying that they're going to have community notes in the same way that X has them, in a bid to kind of preserve free speech. But critics of this move are suggesting it's sort of an existential crisis for the internet and could be the end of truth as we know it. What's your verdict, Matthew?
I think you could potentially fact check your earlier comment, Camilla, of this not being about Elon Musk, in that it is very much about Elon Musk, and these things are always about Elon Musk. X has implemented this system of community notes. These are essentially crowdsourced fact checks. So users sign up to a program and they'll be sent a variety of different posts to vote on whether they are true or false, or maybe contain misleading claims. And Facebook is planning to move towards a similar system. Now, I think those community notes on X have shown some promise. There are concerns that those can be gamed. Even Elon Musk has admitted that, or certainly claimed that, one of his posts was being attacked through the community note system. So those community notes have seen some success. I think it's still too early to say just how good they'll be. In terms of how significant it is, I think there's always been a problem with disinformation and fake news on Facebook. I don't think this is likely to change that significantly. The fact-checking program, as it stood, was relatively good at catching very clear instances of misinformation, for debunking hoaxes. It was never that good at dealing with sort of political biases and politically charged stories. And at times the fact-checkers did get things wrong. I can think of one example where, certainly from a sort of journalist point of view, when stories were spreading that we should be raising questions about what the origin of coronavirus was. And clearly, the jury is still out on that, and, maybe we'll never know. Facebook was labeling those as, false information, when in fact, actually, maybe they were just, opinion or asking questions. So I don't think this is the death knell for truth on the internet, but it's certainly going to change things. And there is a risk that, if it's poorly implemented, this system could be vulnerable to being manipulated. So we'll have to wait and see how effective Facebook is at following Musk.
I think it'll put more responsibility on Zuckerberg and the executives at Meta to run platforms that are able to take down information that is clearly could be very, very damaging, whether that's governments trying to interfere in democratic processes, COVID misinformation. I think you're absolutely right in terms of opinions about COVID. That should be free expression, et cetera, but misinformation that could lead to the deaths of people. We've discussed this before, haven't we, Camilla? I think this is actually hopefully good for professional journalism. What do we have to do every day? Matt, Camilla, me, everything that we do is fact-checked. We as journalists fact-check everything. Our reputation dies if we make mistakes. It means that people will have to come to the platforms where they know there is a rigorous system. We also have regulation. We have legal rules around what we do. Every time you go back to the platforms and look at how they cover issues, there is so much information there that is simply wrong, shouldn't be on the platforms. This is connected to all the arguments around child safety, the type of material that is on Instagram, that is on Facebook, around things like suicide ideation, etc., etc. What is Zuckerberg going to do about that type of material? And if fact-checking is a sort of thin end of the wedge on it's just going to be a free-for-all under this umbrella of freedom of expression, well, that's going to be a big, big problem. And as we sit here and wait for social media companies to become responsible, they're actually becoming more and more, I believe, irresponsible.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the things that was sort of not picked up as much in Zuckerberg's post was this idea that they were going to be less aggressive at kind of automatically taking down content. They were going to do sort of less proactive scanning. And one of the early concerns I was hearing from sort of child safety advocates is that, well, what does this mean for kind of, suicide ideation, self-harm, bullying? Meta tell me that no, suicide, self-harm remains a sort of high priority. It's going to sort of remain on those kinds of lists. But at least from people that I speak to, they're pretty concerned that ultimately this will mean less bad content is caught. Even Zuckerberg admitted we'll catch less bad content. And I spoke to one sort of former Facebook trust and safety executive who said ultimately these changes will mean that there is more harm circulating on social media, and the people that will affect most of all are under 18s and child users.
There have been concerns in the past, haven't there, about social media giants and online platforms actually deplatforming people making perfectly legitimate claims. For instance, this concern about censorship around COVID that you've spoken about, Matt. I remember we covered David Davis, the Tory MP. He had given a speech about vaccine passports at the Conservative Party conference, which appeared on YouTube, but then it was taken down and in some way incorrectly branded sort of anti-vax and dangerous, which it wasn't. And therein the problem lies.
Now, I think it's only fair to say that the fact checkers absolutely refute allegations of bias, and, over the last 6 or 7 years since they've been allowed to fact-check content on Facebook, they have fact-checked thousands of pieces of information correctly. However, that hasn't stopped the criticism.
It's going to be interesting to see the direction of travel for the UK, isn't it? Where does Keir Starmer want to position himself on this? There's been a lot of criticism of this on the European continent. The European Union is all about more regulation of social media platforms. Very different from where America is in the freedom of expression debate. Where is the UK going to sit? Are we going to allow more of a free-for-all, but also, Camilla, to your point, freedom of expression and not taking down things which, of course, should be left up? Put that alongside, does it just become a sewer? And particularly for vulnerable users and those under 18, even more difficult to navigate and even more damaging.
Kamal, we can't end without reflecting on this absolutely remarkable press conference featuring Donald Trump last night. So just to summarize, a few news lines. You've got to love the Donald. Journalists everywhere must have just been looking at each other going, what on earth? So in one press conference, the incoming US president has refused to rule out using American military force to take control of the Panama Canal, which he says is being controlled by the Chinese, has suggested that the Gulf of Mexico should be renamed the Gulf of America, and we're going to get onto this in a moment, suggested that the Americans should seize Greenland. Should we have a listen?
The Panama Canal is vital to our country. It's being operated by China. And we gave the Panama Canal to Panama. We didn't give it to China. We need Greenland for national security purposes. I've been told that for a long time, long before I even ran. People have been talking about it for a long time. You have approximately 45,000 people there. People really don't even know if Denmark has any legal right to it. But if they do, they should give it up because we need it for national security. That's for the free world. I'm talking about protecting the free world.
Are you also considering military force to annex and acquire Canada?
No, economic force. Because Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and you take a look at what that looks like, and it would also be much better for national security. Don't forget, we basically protect Canada. But here's the problem with Canada. So many friends up there. I love the Canadian people. They're great. But we're spending hundreds of billions a year to protect it.
Trump's certainly a gift to the headline writers, as ever, with the As ever with the former and soon-to-be president of the United States, you're never quite sure how much of this could actually ever happen or how much of it is him slightly playing with the world's mind, so to speak. Justin Trudeau, the outgoing Canadian Prime Minister, has said there isn't a snowball's chance in hell that Canada would become part of the United States. And the Panamanian Foreign Minister held a news conference saying the sovereignty of our canal is non-negotiable and is part of our history of struggle and an irreversible conquest. Let it be clear the canal belongs to the Panamanians and it will continue to be that way.
But let's turn to Greenland. So a little bit of history, as potted as I can make it. It was a Danish colony. It was a Danish colony until 1953, but it's now a self-governing territory of Denmark. Now, it is strategically important to America because it's at its northernmost point, and America has had a military base based there for quite some time. The US actually offered Denmark $100 million, that's about 79 million quid, for Greenland after the Second World War. That bid wasn't successful. That was when that military base was established. Donald Trump did try to bounce Denmark into selling Greenland to the US again during his first presidency, but he was rebuffed. He then cancelled a 2019 state visit and branded Denmark's then Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen nasty after she said the idea was absurd. But he hasn't given up on this idea, Kamal. And he even dispatched his son, Donald Trump Jr., to fly to the country this week in his Trump-branded plane just hours after that press conference.
Yeah, and Donald Trump Jr. has said he's only there to take a few videos and insists that this was something that he'd wanted to do for many, many years. As ever, very difficult to judge whether Donald Trump is serious. As you say, Greenland is oil and mineral rich. It is of strategic significance for the United States. And what do the 50,000 citizens of Greenland think about this latest Trump push for a very different type of Greenland in the future? Well, someone who knows the answer to that is Hannah Veal. She is editor at KNR, that's the Greenlandic national broadcaster, and joins us from Nuuk, the capital of Greenland. Welcome, Hannah, to the Daily Tea. Could I ask you first, when you first see a headline like this and Donald Trump, the president-elect, comes up with such a statement, is the initial reaction from Greenland that is preposterous, just like Justin Trudeau is talking about Canada, just like the Panamanian foreign minister has talked about the Panama Canal? Or is it a slightly more nuanced response?
Well, I think the initial reaction when a country like the United States is talking about owning Greenland is, well, that it is a bit preposterous because Greenland right now is a part of the Danish kingdom, and there's a lot of history there about being under the rule of a different country. And so having another country come in and say, we want to own you, yeah, that's getting some reactions. But there is also some interest in what the United States have to offer.
What is that? Because this has gone back a bit, obviously. It's not the first time that Donald Trump, we've explained to our listeners, it's not the first time Donald Trump has said there at least needs to be a much closer relationship of influence from the US.
No, I think he said it first in 2019 when he was president the last time. So yeah, there's definitely some interest in having a closer relationship with the United States. Greenland is, a part of North America, and so we are closely to the United States, and so having a closer relationship and more collaboration economically is definitely interesting.
Hannah, in the UK, I suppose the same can be said for America. I think it's fair to say that there are mixed feelings towards Donald Trump. What do Greenlanders make of him?
Well, I think mixed feelings is a good way to say it. There were definitely people who were welcoming Donald Trump Jr. yesterday, who was very interested in Trump and what he has to offer. And there are also people who think that he says some pretty crass things sometimes and is a little direct. So yeah, mixed feelings.
Has any of the senior figures in Greenland come out and said anything about this, and are they poised to react?
Well, the head of the Greenlandic government, Muchibe Il, he has many times now said that Greenland is not for sale and that Greenland belongs to the Greenlanders. So that seems to be the general political statement.
Just gives a little bit, Hannah, of background for people who may not know about Greenland's relationship with Denmark. Because, of course, one thing that Donald Trump has said is if there isn't a positive response from Greenland, but also from Denmark, then tariffs are going to follow. So in terms of your relationship with Denmark, that would then become a tariff war possibly with the European Union. Of course, Denmark is a member of the European Union. How does that relationship work, or are you more autonomous than that?
Well, it's a bit complicated. So Greenland became a colony of Denmark's in like 300 years ago and was a colony for a very long time. And now we have our own government. So a lot of the decisions regarding Greenland is made here in Greenland, but we are still a part of the Danish kingdom. And so there are decisions being made about us in Denmark, in the Danish parliament. We are not a part of the EU, but we are, in relation to the EU because we are a part of Denmark or the Danish kingdom.
Who would make this decision then? Would it be your prime minister or would it be made in Denmark?
Yeah, well, we don't actually know exactly how that would work yet. But the decision to have, independence in Greenland, which is something that a lot of Greenlanders want, that is a decision that's made here in Greenland, but it would also have to be approved by the Danish government. And then if and when that becomes a reality, it would be probably Greenland's decision to form a closer relationship to the United States.
Hannah Vill, thank you very much indeed for joining us from Greenland to fill us in on some of the country's history, but also the reaction to Donald Trump's attempted takeover.
I think Hannah there, Camilla, suggesting that maybe it's not quite as wild an idea as you might initially think, that there could be far closer relationships between certainly an independent Greenland and the United States. The point she makes that actually they consider that Greenland is part of North America.
Yeah, exactly. Also, 57,000 people sounds like quite a nice place to have a very quiet walking holiday, Kamal.
80% of Greenland is ice. So keep your crampons close by.